This is Be Seen, Be Heard with Jade. Jade Seabury grew up imagining seeing her name in lights on Broadway one day, so she went to the best performing arts schools in Queens, New York, where she was born and raised. When she decided to expand her horizons and go off to college at the University of Hartford, a new path was set for her. She wanted to get her master's in public relations and come back to be an amazing entertainment publicist. Jade returned to NYC after college and became a partner in a PR firm for 8 years and then started Diverse Tunes. Co-founded with her childhood friend in 2018, this educational foundation became her passion, and the tagline Be Seen, Be Heard was the start of a new web series that tells people of color stories that could empower everyone.
Hi, this is Be Seen and Be Heard with Jade. Today we have Angela. Angela is the storyboard revisionist on the Emmy Award-winning show, a Nickelodeon animated series, The Loud House. So, Angela, how are you doing today?
I am doing very well. It's very nice to be here. It's very nice to meet you in person. I really like Diverse Tunes. I've gotten to watch a lot of y'all's videos, so this is very exciting.
Yay, thank you. I'm so excited to hear that. Okay, so you joined the Loud House crew on December of 2016 as a production assistant. So what were the lessons that you gained from that? And did you ever want to become a producer?
Sure. So with production, you learn how to be organized, which was very important for me. And it's important for artists too. I feel like the majority of artists being organized, working on deadline, having spreadsheets, that doesn't always come naturally to us. So it's actually a very good skill if not only if you want to go into production and eventually be production coordinator or production manager or producer, but also if you wanted to go into art. And one of the biggest takeaways from it was I learned how the television production pipeline works, which is not something that most schools are able to teach you because with my experience, when I was in art school and with a lot of other people I know that were in art school, they don't teach you the television production pipeline because a lot of teachers haven't actually worked in television. They've worked in feature, so they don't really know about it. So I learned what everybody's job was. I learned who everybody was. I learned how to take better notes, how to be in meetings, how to work with the entire crew, how to ask people for information when it was crunch time and they were really busy. You know, you learn how to talk to people so you're not just going up to artists and saying, this is due right now, but you're saying, hey, just so you know, this thing is coming up. If you're having an issue with it, please tell us. And then we can help you out. We can talk with the art director. That works a lot and goes over a lot better than do this now, you're fired, because nobody wants to hear that, especially from the PA. So I think those were the main takeaways, just learning how everything works, learning how to work with different people, and learning how to be organized yourself.
And we talk about that a lot in like diverse tune panels and things like that, like school versus like apprenticeships and things like of that nature. Do you feel like it was still valuable, everything like you learned at school? Because like you said, most of your professors and people that taught you didn't necessarily work in the business. And I learned that like when I was just going to school for PR, I was thankful enough that most of my professors actually were in the business and learned by being in the business itself. So they didn't just, teach us from a book. They taught us from real life experience. Do you think it's still valuable to get that art degree?
That's an excellent question. Actually, it's a question that a lot of people ask. It depends on a couple of things. So the first thing is it depends on what it is that you want to do and what it is that you want to learn. So the good thing now is that you don't have to go to school to learn, at least on the arts side, you don't have to go to school to learn how to be an artist. You can learn from online schools. You can learn from online classes. You can learn from YouTube tutorials. You can learn from books. You can learn from following people on Twitter and Instagram. A lot of times they'll do Insta stories on how they do things, or they might be offering mentorships. Or if you meet people at conventions and you develop a rapport, after a while, you can just ask them and say, hey, would you mind taking a look at this? I have a couple of questions. So you don't necessarily need to go to school, but the good thing that certain schools can teach you is a lot of schools have more or less a direct line to certain studios. Not all schools, but a lot of schools, they bring in the recruiters and they bring in artists and they have portfolio reviews at the school. They have portfolio days. And so the recruiters know that, oh, this is a good school for us to go and interview different people for internships and training programs. Mm-hmm. And also, some schools have people that are still in the industry that are working. Mm-hmm. So my advice to people is go to a school where recruiters are actually visiting that school, and you can look that up. You can go online, you can see where people went to school, and you can ask them if their school is any good or not. Go to schools where they're teaching the fundamentals, color theory, perspective, gesture drawing, acting. Make sure they're actually teaching the subject that you actually want to learn. Like if you want to be a storyboard artist and your school doesn't have a storyboard program, go to that school. That doesn't make any sense. Go to a school that has that program. And then third, go to a school where the teachers are current, because you might have the best teacher, but if they haven't been in the industry for 20 years, there's just things they're not going to know. And that's not to throw shade on those teachers. It's just the truth. You want people that are more current, and then go to a school you can afford. Don't get loans. I know everybody talks about loans. Don't get loans. Yeah. Don't go into debt. I have student loan debt. It stinks.
I do too.
Don't do it. Just work through school, get scholarships, get grants, do work study. If you're not able to do that, just honestly hold off on school until you can afford to go into it without getting into soul-crushing debt. And then for production, because that's a little different, you're not going to really learn production in school. I actually learned production by working in reality television. So when I graduated, there's a website called staffmeup.com, and they talk about different reality shows, some scripted shows throughout the US. And a lot of times the requirement is have a car, don't be weird. That's really it. It's like have a car and don't be weird, because you're working with a lot of times like on-air talent. Like I worked I was a driver and I was a runner for American Idol when they came to San Francisco. So my job was to go to Starbucks 8 times a day and get all the producers and the executive producers and the judges snacks. And I had to drive J-Lo's hairdresser and her little team to and from like the hotel and where we were recording. And so they wanted someone that was going to be nice and that wasn't going to freak them out.
Exactly.
So I was very nice. I drove very safely. We told a few jokes. It was very calm. I let them out of the car. I left them alone. I didn't ask them for their autograph. I didn't ask them for a job. I just left them alone. And I ended up working as a reality TV show PA on 4 or 5 different shows.
Nice.
And so I was able to put that on my resume, and that helped me get my job at Nick because I had an art degree. I had been volunteering at animation conventions, I had a podcast, and I had done PA work. And they went, oh, well, she's done all this stuff. She knows how to be a PA. So even if you can't find PA work in animation, find it somewhere doing some kind of comparable skill. And if you do that, then you don't necessarily have to go to school.
So you did a storyboard test on the episode No Laughing Matter. Walk us through like the process of that.
Sure thing. So I've actually done 14 tests, just to let you guys know, because the reason I bring that up is because it's really hard to get a job in animation.
Yeah.
And I want people to know that it may actually take you a couple of years.
True.
So if you have
to get where you want to be.
Yeah, if you have to take multiple tests, that's normal. Like I know people that have done 6 tests. I know people like me who've done like 14, 15 tests. I've heard of people having to do 30 tests. Ooh. So I'll actually just walk through just in general what it's like to take a test.
It's like, yeah.
Just saying. So a storyboard test, what it is they'll give you 1 to 3 pages of a script, and they'll either give you something they've completely made up, which will never be on the air, or they'll give you like a sample of something that will be on the air, but not for like a year. That way you can't watch it and see what other people have already done. Gotcha. So they'll give you 1 to 3 pages of the script. They'll give you the character designs. They'll give you the background designs. If there's audio, they might give you the audio. And a lot of times they'll also give you, if it's a show that's been on the air, they'll give you a sample of a storyboard that somebody else has already done so that you have an idea of what the style is. If it hasn't been on the air, a lot of times they'll just give you a bunch of concept art and just say, well, do something that kind of looks like this. That way you have an idea of what you're doing. And most tests are a week. I took a test once that was 2 weeks. That's pretty rare, and it's pretty great to be able to do that. A lot of times now, like the Animation Guild, which is our union, they're trying to get it so that people don't have to take tests as much because it takes a lot of time. And they're also trying to get it so that people can get paid to take tests because it takes a lot of time. So that's great. But for now, you're probably going to have to take a test, especially if you've never worked in the industry. So what you do is you board out the scene to the best of your ability based on the material that they've given you. And you can look up tests online too. Like a lot of people in their portfolios are on like Scribd or Twitter or Tumblr still around or Instagram. They'll show like, this was my test if you want to get a sense of kind of what a test looks like. And then you turn it in. If they like your test, they'll bring you in for an interview. You're usually talking with them for 20 to 40 minutes. You'll meet with the director. You'll probably meet with the producer. You might meet with one of the other storyboard artists. And this is just so they can see, would I want to be in a room with this person for 8 to 14 hours, 5 days a week, 52 weeks out of the year? Would that be an enjoyable experience? If the answer is yes, you'll probably get hired. So that's how the testing process works if you're doing storyboards. If you're doing character or prop designs or DG designs, you're designing character turnarounds or lots of different props, or you're painting lots of things. But
So what is it like to say, like, I work on an Emmy award-winning show? Is that like huge? Is that like a huge like milestone that you can be like, wow, that's me?
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. It also gives you job security, which is really nice because most animated shows, truthfully, only last 1 or 2 seasons.
Yeah.
So we're in season 5, which is great. That very rarely happens. I feel like we're getting into Simpsons, Family Guy territory, that have been on for, 87 years. So it's a nice feeling. Also, it's nice because it's an acknowledgement of the hard work of the entire team. Because there's 40 of us at Nick, and I believe 20 to 30 people at Jamfield, which is the animation studio that animates the show. Oh, and so it's a testament to every single person involved that, hey, everybody worked really, really hard to make this. And the reward is that our peers in the industry recognize the hard work. And it's a really nice thing to say. It was really cool because they brought the statue to the show, and all of us got to, we all got to hold it. And we all got to take pictures of it. So everybody's Instagram is filled with pictures of us going, like this. And the thing is, it's heavy. It's like a substantial thing, and it's heavy and it's really pointy. So you can actually do some damage with that. But it's a cool feeling. It's also nice because I've worked on shows that while I enjoyed people that I worked with, I haven't always worked on stuff that I wanted my little cousins to watch. And so it's nice to work on something where I can say, no, you can watch this. Cousin Angela says this is okay. There's nothing questionable in this. It's fine. So it's nice to win an award for something that's actually helpful to children.
You can be like really proud of this and be like, okay, this is for everyone's view. Mm-hmm. So how long have you been hosting the Animated Journey podcast? And tell everybody like the background story about it and how you got started on it.
Sure. So I hosted a podcast called The Animated Journey. I hosted it from February 2016 to March 2020. We have 100 episodes. All of them are on iTunes and Stitcher and Google Play, and they will be up pretty much indefinitely. I have no intention of taking them down. I've actually talked to quite a few people that started listening to it after we officially ended, which is really cool. So I want to make sure it's out there. So the point of the show is we interview people working in television, film, and games. And when I say we interview, it started by myself, and then around episode 57. My friend Jeff Schutze, who's a storyboard artist, he worked on BoJack Horseman, and he's working on a couple of unannounced projects now. He came on and he helped me edit the show as well as serving as a co-host, which was a lot of fun. We were able to have a lot of fun back and forth. So the reason I started the show was I really like podcasting. I really like interviewing. I was on the newspaper staff in high school and in college. And I also was an editor at a publishing company, and I interviewed a lot of people for different career books that we did. I worked for an educational publisher, and I also worked at the Denver Art Museum, and I interviewed people for our member magazine. So I have a lot of experience interviewing, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoy hearing people's stories. I enjoy seeing what people are about, and I really enjoy podcasting. I listen to about 20 podcasts about a range of different things. I think podcasting is super cool. And what had happened was when I was in school, I was listening to a lot of different podcasts. And in particular, I was listening to the animation podcast, which was very good. It was Clay Cadis, who went on to co-direct the Angry Birds movie. He's a very nice guy. So I was listening to him. I was listening to the Bancroft brothers. I was listening to Chris Wimberly's The Animation Network. And I really liked them. And I noticed, with the exception of Chris's podcast, the other animation podcasts I was listening to, while I really enjoyed them, and the people that were hosting them were super nice people, everybody they were interviewing had been in the industry for 20 plus years. The majority of them were white. The majority of them were men. The majority of them worked at Disney. The majority of them went to CalArts. And that's not a bad thing. But for me, as a Black woman who was not 20 years old, who watched different things besides Disney and who wasn't going to CalArts, I thought, this isn't helping me, because a lot of what they said was, well, I went to CalArts, and then my third year in, I quit and worked for Disney. And then I worked there for 25 years. The end. And I'm like, okay, that's real cool for you. For the thousands of other people, what do we do? And so I thought, okay, well, when I graduate, I'll do a show and I'll interview people that I know and the people that they know. I'll interview men and women of color. I'll interview different people. I'll interview people that are younger than me, people that are older than me. I'll interview people in different fields besides just animator, because in the US, most people in the US that work in animation, they're not actually animators. They're working as production coordinators, prop designers, storyboard artists, voiceover actors. They're doing rigging, they're doing modeling, they're doing lighting. They're working in video games. They're working in preschool. They're working in adult animation. There's more things that people are doing now, and more people are doing that than working in feature. I'll interview people that haven't been in as long, because that'll be more relevant to people like me that are in school and just graduated who are trying to get a job. And so what I did was, when I graduated, I had met a lot of people through working, through different organizations that I was in, through school. I had been at a bunch of conventions. I had friends that had gone to different schools, that were working in different states. And so I just emailed 40 people that I knew. And I said, I'm going to start. And this was back in October, November of 2015. And I said, okay, I'm starting a podcast. Here's the title. Here's what it's about. Here's how long it'll be. Here's what we're going to talk about. I would love to have you as a guest. If you're interested in being a guest, or if you know someone, and I think this is key, if you know someone who would like to be a guest, have them email me. And out of 40, 20 people got back to me. And out of that 20, the first 15 of them were the first 15 people I had on the show. And the way that I did the show was, I researched how to podcast, because I didn't know how. I emailed people that I liked who had a podcast, and I just asked them, hey, what equipment do you use? And they're like, oh, wait, thank you for liking our show. Here are the mics that we used. Here's the soundboards that we used. Here's the websites that we went on. And I talked to Chris Wimberly about it. He was super supportive. I talked to Cassie Soliday, who had a podcast, Ink and Paint Girls. She was super, helpful with it. And I thought, okay, great. And I interviewed 15 people. And then after I interviewed them, I edited their podcast. And then after I edited it, then I put it out there, because by then I had a buffer. So if I had a week that I was super busy, it wasn't going to kill me. So
Exactly.
that's how I got started. And around episode 50, it just became, wow, this is a lot of work. And I remember I was at a bar with a couple of friends and Jeff said, oh, I'll help you out. And I went, great. So then Jeff came on to help me out, which was super awesome. And it just went from there. And I think the best thing about it is hearing from people that it helps them kind of figure out what they need to do, like figure out what kind of studio they want to work for, what kind of work they need to do, how they need to do it, how to go about it. And that's been really nice. We were on Facebook and Twitter and Tumblr and Instagram for a long time.
Yeah.
It was fun because we got to talk to different people. And I think the most surreal thing about it is pre-COVID, we would just go to events, not for the podcast, but just to either go to screenings and go to events. And I would have people come up to me because they would hear me talking to somebody.
And they would recognize you.
Yeah, they recognize my voice. And they're like, are you Angela? Are you Sketchy Soul? I'm like, yeah. I love your podcast. I'm like, you do? Wow, that's cool. Hi, who are you?
That's
Tell
really
me about
cool.
you. Yeah, that's actually how I met Brian Way for Black and Animated.
Yeah.
I met Way on Twitter, and then he came to visit Nickelodeon because one of his friends worked there. And then I met Bree at a mixer that Chris had organized. And that's actually how I met Jeff, because I had met Jeff years prior at Alternative Press Expo. He was selling his comic book, and I bought his comic, and I really liked his comic. Years later, we're at one of Chris Wimberly's mixers, and I look at him and I go, I recognize this guy. And he looked at me and he goes, I recognize her. And we walked up to each other, and it's like, do you have a comic? Do you have a podcast? Hey, we actually know each other.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really cool when somebody just recognizes you just off the sound of your voice. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's cool. It's weird. I'm like, and it also it shows you that you have to be responsible. You know, you don't just want to just say stuff for the sake of saying stuff. Like what you put out there, you want it to be helpful to people. Conscious, yeah. Yeah. And that's not to freak people out. Like you don't want to live your life going, everybody's watching me, because they're not. But at a certain level, it's people notice what you do. Exactly. So you want to do good things. You want to do helpful things, because people will learn from that, and they'll notice that, and they'll use that for their own lives. So very true. Just a good thing to know.
Exactly. What advice do you have for all of the budding podcasters out there? Like you said, you just searched what was like the best equipment and things like that. But 5 years later, what's their first step? And if they have like nowhere to start to like struggling to build an audience?
Sure. So a couple of things. I think the first thing is have a topic that you'll be interested in talking about for a prolonged period of time. So one of the reasons why I chose the format that I chose was I knew I wanted to work in animation, and I knew that I'd be working in it for a long time. And I knew that I would not run out of guests, because there's thousands of people that work in the industry, and I'm a very outgoing person. You know, I go to a lot of events, I'm in a lot of organizations, I meet a lot of people. So I knew that I would be able to find enough people. So no matter what your show is, whether it's animation or just completely something else, just have a format that you know that you can sustain. And that's really important too, because you're not always going to like doing it. I didn't always enjoy doing the podcast. When you're editing at 2 a.m, you're just like, I don't want to do this right now, but you need to do it. You told your listeners, hey, this comes out on Tuesday. Have it come out on Tuesday. That means you're working super late. That's on you and your lack of organization, or just things that have happened. So know that it's not always going to be fun. So be willing to do something where even when it's not fun, even if it's a slog, even if it's difficult, even if a guest cancels, even if, you know, we've had interviews where we had to do them twice because the audio was bad. We've had interviews where people's cats come in, doors are slamming, garage doors are opening, people's kids are coming in, there's sirens going off, there's crickets, it's raining, you know, stuff fails. Like, just know that something will probably break, and that's okay. So that's the first thing. Have something sustainable. Second is know that things will go wrong. Third is, if you can, have someone to do it with you. I started on my own. I'm glad I started on my own because I probably wouldn't have started otherwise because I didn't have anybody else that I knew that wanted to do this at the time. I started getting help later on once people got to know me and like, oh, I want to help with this. So if you can find someone that will help you, bring in somebody that will help you and that they're serious about it and they're not doing it just to say, hey, look what I'm doing. I'm so cool. They're doing it because they genuinely want to. Like Jeff genuinely wanted to help. He is not a spotlight guy at all. Like that's not his MO. He just really liked the show and we got along super well. And he was like, I want to help out. I really like audio editing. Cool, you're in. You know, Bree and Wei, they were friends, had the same mission. They wanted to help promote Black artists and share the work of Black artists and get more Black artists involved in animation. They worked together. Chris, he had an entire team of people he knew that wanted to help out. They all came to help out. So if you can find somebody, that's the third thing. And then the fourth is just research. Like, get the best equipment you can for your budget. If your budget is a phone, use your phone. If you can afford a mic, get a mic. If you can afford headphones, get headphones. And know that you can build over time. You don't have to have the best website, the best equipment starting out. As you continue going, you'll get better equipment. You'll find better sites. You'll find better ways to do things, but you have to get started. And then as far as building an audience, don't worry so much about that. That'll come in time. A couple of things to do are, have a Facebook page, have a Twitter account, have an Instagram account, promote it. Invite people that have podcasts that are or YouTube channels that are similar to yours to be guests, because then you can promote each other. That's a really big deal. I had Chris and Cassie and Bree and Wei on my show. That was helpful. I had Steven Silver on my show. Like I had people that had their own shows on the show. So that helps us both out. So that's a really good thing. Go to events. Go to events for whatever it is that you're doing so that you can talk about it and have good content, release things on time. I heard a pastor say once where you don't have to have the best hot dog stand, but if you have the only hot dog stand and you're consistent, people will eat those hot dogs because you're the only one. And so for me, it was like, I tried to put out the best podcast I could, but I knew that, even if it's not the very, very best that has ever been every single time, if I just keep going, it will eventually get better and get traction. So I would say worry about the audience and getting zillions of people to listen last. That'll come with time. Like we ended up getting a good following because we'd been on for 4 years and had 100 episodes. By the end, we had thousands of people listening. But when it first started, I don't know, maybe like my family, my family, my friends that knew me, maybe like 30 people. Like it wasn't a whole lot of people. So that's okay.
So I always tell my mentees that internships are key. So you had your first internship at Pixar. So was it memorable? What were your key takeaways?
Okay, so Pixar was very hard. So I want to let people know internships can be very hard. There's a lot of work that has to be done. There's definitely like a learning curve with that. So I was a production assistant intern in the development department. And that was cool because I got to see all the different movies in development. But it was also a little weird because at least with Pixar, because they're so big, because they're so well known, they're very tight-lipped, which is to their benefit. Things don't leak out of Pixar the way they leak out of other studios. And that's on purpose. They are very tight-lipped about stuff. Yeah. And they were tight-lipped internally. The only people that knew what was going on in development was development. So my intern, I made friends with the other interns. There were only 5 of us. They were all working in different departments. they had no idea what I did. They had no idea what we were working on. I wasn't allowed to talk about it. No one in development was allowed to talk about it. It got to the point where I remember we used to have this coffee time with the interns and a bunch of the former interns who had become PAs. And one of my friends looked at me and said, I don't think you actually work here. I think you just come for the snacks and then you leave. And I'm like, no, really, I work here. Because they would all talk about, like, here's what I did today. Here's what I did today. Angela, what did you do today? And be like, stuff for movies that you'll find out in 2 to 5 years.
Wow.
Like, yeah, so it's things like that. But let me tell how I got the internship, because I think this will help people, and then what I did once I was there. So to get the internship, meet people. I met people that worked at Pixar. That helped me get the internship, for sure. So when I was at Academy of Art, I had a friend who had a friend that used to go to our school who was a storyboard artist at Pixar. And I used to be the co-president of the Women in Animation chapter in San Francisco, which I know we'll talk about a little later. But we used to have our meetings at Pixar because Pixar wanted to invest in diversity development. They realized, hey, we need to work on this. You know, we need to work on having more women and people of color, just different people at the studio. They realized that was an issue. So they invited, and then one of our co-presidents did work at Pixar, Angela Entzminger. So they allowed us to have our meetings at Pixar, which was great. And that helped us with membership, because when you can tell people our meetings are at Pixar, everybody wants to join. So we had a screening of Monsters University, and we had a panel. And I was the moderator of that panel. And my friend's friend was on that panel. And so I introduced myself and I said, hey, you're friends with one of my friends. He said I should talk to you. So then the next week we met up for coffee, and it turned out we both grew up in Texas. We both had weird experiences in college, and we just had a lot in common. So we ended up becoming friends over time because we had a lot in common. And I was a storyboard major at school. And so she used to look at my homework and give me like critiques. And it was really nice because it came out of doing the legwork. So I always recommend to people, get involved in organizations and do good work. And don't be afraid to like talk to people and just ask them for like 10 minutes. Like when you meet somebody, you don't ask them, look at my portfolio. Just ask them, hey, do you have 10 or 15 minutes? I would like to ask you some very specific questions. Is that okay? Majority of the time I found, unless they're super busy, the answer will be yes. You ask them the specific questions. If they're interested, they'll tell you, hey, you can keep asking me questions. If they're not, they'll say, cool, thank you. And that'll be it. With her, she was like, hey, I'd be happy to continue answering your questions, which was really awesome. And so because of that, because I was doing women in animation, because after I graduated, I started doing reality show PA work. And because I knew my mentor, who I considered it was Rosie Sullivan. She ended up being on the podcast too, which was really cool. So she wrote me a really nice like recommendation letter, and I applied for a job at Pixar, and I think it was the special events committee, and I didn't like it, or not that I didn't like it, but I didn't get in. And when I didn't get in, I emailed the recruiter and I said, hey, thank you for the opportunity to interview. And I see that you also offer internships. I would love to apply for the internship. And I feel like because I'd already interviewed for a job, they already knew who I was. And so I got to do a phone interview, which was very similar to the previous phone interview. And I think it was even with the same person. And so it was kind of the same questions. And they're like, we've already talked to you. So, so our interview was like 15 minutes. It was super short. And then I went in for the internship interview. And what got me the internship was I had done a lot of work for Women in Animation. And unbeknownst to me, the people that were interviewing me had been at our meetings. And these were meetings that sometimes had like 100+ people. So I didn't always get to meet everybody. So they had seen me work, they had seen me moderate panels. And so that helped. And then working in reality TV helped because they just thought that was fascinating. They were like, oh, what is that? Tell us about that. And also, they knew I wanted to do animation. And I also wanted to do production, even though my ultimate focus was storyboarding and becoming a showrunner. I wanted to learn production because I had gotten a chance through different organizations to meet people that had run shows. And all of them had told me, it's very important to know how the pipeline works, and it's important to know how shows work, because you may have heard stories about people that they'd never worked in animation, they'd never worked on another show. They have a really good idea, and they're really charismatic. They get a show, and the show is a nightmare because they don't know what they're doing. And they've never managed people.
Yeah.
And everyone hates the show, and years later it ends up in like some tell-all memoir of this terrible experience. And I thought, I don't want that to be my future show. I don't want to be a footnote in someone's life story about, oh, I worked on Angela's show, it was the worst. Like, I don't want that to happen. So I thought, if I work in production, I'll learn how this works. And so I told them that in the interview, that I genuinely want to know. I'm not just this is not a fly-by-night operation. I'm not going to be in production for 6 months, get an art job, and quit. And so that helped me get my internship. So then once I was there, I can talk about general things that I did more than specifics. So you just do a lot of admin work. You know, you're doing a lot of, and this I think applies pretty much for everybody, but you make a lot of copies, you get a lot of lunches, you order a lot of snacks, you take a lot of notes in different meetings, you organize calendars, you track people down. If people don't know where people are, you go and find them because they might have.
It was the gopher type of internship. Yeah.
You are a runner, a gopher, an admin, the lighting person, you know, the ordering person. You're making sure that everything is laid out. You're making sure they have the right notebooks, the right pens, the right snacks. You're just trying to make their lives. You're like a personal assistant. You know?
You're everything.
Yeah, like I took one of the producer's car to the shop. It was making a funny noise, and she's like, "I started with my car," and I'm like, "I'll take it." I remember there was
we don't trust interns to do that in New York. We're like, no.
Yeah, I feel like I'm a trustworthy person, so they're like, "Oh, Angela can take my car. She's not going to drive off with it. I'm not going to drive away with your car."
No, we would just think, no, they might ding it or something like that. Like, no.
Yeah, I did a lot of grunt work. And it was hard too, because here's the thing. This is something I actually recommend to everybody. In my particular case, they had all been working with each other for so long and so closely that they didn't realize that some of the stuff they did, there was no way that I would know to do. So sometimes they would say, "Oh, just go and do this." And I would do it. They'd be like, "Oh, wait, that's not the way that I wanted it." I'm like, "But I didn't know." They're like, "Oh." And so there was a lot
they just assumed that you knew.
Yeah, there was a lot of miscommunication. And so what helped, and that was very frustrating. And so what ended up helping was I realized, because I was an intern for 3 months. It was a 3-month internship. I realized that during the second month that, okay, I need to start meeting with people every day. I need to have a meeting with them every morning. And I need to start asking them, not just what do you want done?
How do you
want this done? Because I realized the way they want it done is very different. All the other PA jobs I'd had were pretty similar, and this one was totally different. Because they were different, because they're different people and different studio, different things. So my advice to every intern, PA, person starting out, meet often with your team. Ask them specifically, how do you want this done? What is the time frame for this? And if they give you multiple things at once, if different people are coming at you with different things, ask the person in charge, what is the most important thing? What needs to be done first? And when people give you things, tell them, I can do this, but so-and-so is above you.
Exactly.
They're having me do this first. As soon as that's done, I would be happy to help you.
Exactly.
Or let me get someone to help you with this. Because honestly, if they're professional, if they know how to work, they'll appreciate that.
Yeah.
If they're unprofessional and weird, that is your first sign that that might not be the right team and the right company. If they start reacting to that, to like
Very
just
true.
normal day-to-day stuff, then you know, okay, this might not be the best place. So that's what I did. And then once I started doing that, the internship was way smoother. It was
Yeah.
better communication. And I knew what was going on.
What is your best advice for the next generation that wants to follow in your footsteps?
Wow. Okay. So for me, it was a little different because the first career I wanted to do wasn't animation. I actually started in publishing, and I worked in publishing for about 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then I switched to animation, and now I've been doing animation for almost 4 years. So I think the first piece of advice is you can change. If you're working in a different career and you decide, hey, I don't want to do this anymore, change. If you're working in animation and you decide you don't want to do it anymore, change. It's fine. Most people change 2 or 3 times. I've met several people who've had multiple careers, who've done very different things. That's totally normal. It's what most people are going to do, especially nowadays.
Yeah.
So if you want to change, you can change. Some advice that I would give is figure out before you go to school, if you go to school, what specific job in animation you want to do. And you can figure that out by watching the credits. So watch the credits of your favorite television shows and movies, see what those jobs are, and then look up those jobs and figure out, is this something that I think that I would enjoy? And then figure out what are the skills for that particular job. And you can figure out what skills you need by looking up on company websites when they have those jobs open. You can see, like, for example, for storyboard artists, understanding of cinematography, understanding perspective, comedy, and action, their drafting skills, able to use Storyboard Pro, able to work with different people, able to turn things in on time, and just get those skills and figure out, do I need to go to school for those skills, or can I figure this out from YouTube and books and online classes and just my own practice? And then work towards that. So working backwards is a better way than, I want to be an artist, I'm going to go to school and have no idea what you're going to do, no idea where you want to go, no idea what kind of show you want to work on, what kind of shows you like, what studio you want to work for, and you're just picking school because it's 20 minutes away from your house. Don't do that. That's a waste of money. So be very targeted in what you're doing. And then also join every organization that you can. If there are no organizations where you live, create your own. Right now, we're in COVID. So this is, I hesitate to say advantage because we're in the middle of a horrid pandemic. But one of the good things that's come out of COVID is that everything is online. Things that didn't used to be online that you couldn't access, you can now access no matter where you live. So there are classes you can now take that didn't used to be online that you can take. There are people that didn't really used to be online that much that are now online. Things like Rise Up Animation, which if you want to get your portfolio reviewed and if you're a person of color, it's free. Go on Instagram, look at Rise Up Animation, click on the link, sign up. Things like that. Those now exist. There's places like Concept Design Academy, which is in Pasadena. Their classes are now online because everything has to be closed because California is this horrific hotspot for COVID, unfortunately. But you can take their classes now if you live in a different state, which you couldn't before. So take advantage of what's currently open. Join every class you can, join every organization you can, meet people online, save your money, don't go into debt, and know that it will take you probably a couple of years. I had a teacher, Scotland Barnes. He worked at Disney TV for a long time. He once told me that it typically takes 2 to 5 years for you to get the job that you want in animation. And that's true. It took me 2 years to become a PA, and it took me 3 years after that to become a storyboard revisionist. So just know that it will take you time. But if you're really focused with creating work that is comparable to the professionals whose portfolios you're looking at, and if you're meeting a lot of people, And if you're putting your work out there, eventually you'll get hired somewhere. You just have to put in the time.
Being a woman of color in the industry inspires young girls, letting them know that they can grow up to do what you do. So do you think that it's harder or easier for them now because people today are speaking up about the diversity issues in your industry?
Hopefully it's easier. I'm not sure. I'm honestly not sure. For me, I don't really know because I've always been the only Black person or the Black woman or the only person of color or sometimes the only woman in a majority of jobs I've had and also where I've lived. I grew up in Sugar Land, Texas. It's not exactly the mecca of Black people.
Gotcha.
You know?
Yeah.
I went to the University of Texas at Austin. There weren't a ton of Black people. I went to Academy of Art. There weren't a ton of Black people. I worked in publishing in New York. I worked in publishing in Denver. I lived in Denver. There's just not a whole lot of Black people in a lot of the places where I lived. I lived in Ventura, California. Not a lot of Black people. I worked in IT. Like, just for me, there just hasn't been many people that have looked like me. So I really just had to rely on myself and my family, pretty much. My hope is that more people are coming in because it does wonders for your self-esteem and for your psyche and being able to make friends and talking to people when there's at least one other person or when there's 3 people or like 5 people. That is an amazing feeling. But I will say too that you can still make friends even if people aren't women and they're not Black. You can still have a voice. Don't let that stop you from being yourself. If they don't understand you, if you're not fitting in, find your place, make your own space for yourself. And it isn't fair that we have to do that, but you have to be the kind of person that you want to be. You can't be who they want you to be because they don't know what they want either. They really don't. They don't know what they want. They don't know who you are. And by they, I mean white people. Let's just be real. Like they don't know. So you be you. You bring yourself. You be as great as you can be. And if they recognize that, great. And if they don't, that's on them. And you find the place that you want to be. But at the same time, seek out people that will support you. If you're a woman of color, seek out other women of color. Seek out men of color. Seek out white people that support you. I've had mentors that were Black. I've had mentors that were white. I've had mentors that were Asian. I've had mentors that were Latinx. And a lot of times, mentorship is an interesting word because a lot of these people didn't realize they were my mentors. It wasn't like I went up to them and said, "You're my mentor now." Yeah. We didn't have organized mentor meetings. It was just people that they knew more than I did about the industry or about my field or just about working with other people. And I admired them and I looked up to them and they gave me solid advice and they listened to me. They listened to me. They cared about me. They cared how I was doing. They would ask me how I was doing or asking me how things were going. And I can be honest with them about it. So especially seek that out for people of color. But if they're not Black or they're not Latinx or they're not Asian, they may still want to help you. So don't discount them just because they're white. And then also help the people that are coming behind you. I started mentoring people when I was a PA because I had friends that weren't in the industry yet. And I knew people that listened to the podcast that weren't in the industry yet. And so Nickelodeon, they have a mentorship program where you can volunteer to mentor high school students. So I started mentoring people at Burbank High School. Nice. And I'm like, well, I'm a PA, but they're 17. Yeah. I know a little bit more than a 17-year-old, so I can help them out with that. So it's kind of like, I think, it was cool. I think of it like you have a hand up and you have a hand out. You know, you're reaching up so that someone else can help you, and you're reaching back so that you can pull somebody else up. And it's just like one big chain, and you're all just moving up together. Exactly. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Angela. It was such a pleasure to have you on today. Thank you for having me. It was really great talking to you. I look forward to seeing more episodes of this too and seeing everybody else that comes on. Yay. Thank you. Okay. Everyone, this has been Be Seen and Be Heard with Jade. Have a great day. Bye, everybody.